Welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. And before I introduce our guest today, just wanted to run through a couple of quick announcements. We have our symposium coming at the end of the month. All of the registration information for that will be on the chat or on the QR on the screen. We also have our HITLAB Innovator Summit coming up late this fall. So make sure that you check that out. It's going to be a really fun in real life event in New York. And we also wanted to announce that we are looking for sponsors. So if you are interested in sponsoring Women's Health Tech Wednesdays or other parts of HITLAB, all of that information is also going to be on the screen as well. And today I am very excited to formally bring on our guest, Michelle Hoy, who is a Senior Vice President of Clinical Operations at Ellipsis Health. As you know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So if you have any for Michelle during our conversation, please use the Q&A feature or the chat, and I will make sure that we get to it. So thanks so much for being here, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to kind of dive in. I know this is going to be a really, really fun and engaging conversation, specifically it's kind of centered around the work that you do at Ellipsis Health and mental health specifically. But before we jump into all of that, would love if you could just share, a quick introduction and give us a little bit more of a background on yourself.
Sure. So I am a licensed mental health therapist and a certified addictions counselor. I have been doing clinical work for quite a long time and also been a leader executive in specialty behavioral health care provider organizations and have been part of Ellipsis Health for about 1.5 years now. I was just so certain that we in the mental health field have to innovate and do things differently, I had to be part of doing something to transform how we provide care. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And would love if you can kind of walk us through your career path. I know that you've kind of been a provider in this space for a very, very long time. Was this kind of something that you always saw yourself doing? Would love if you could walk us through that journey a little bit.
Well, when I went to college, I majored in psychology because I was always super interested in how humans work and think and act and behave. And I really went to school to be an elementary school teacher.
Wow.
That was my main course of study. And when I was doing my elementary education work, everyone commented at how great I was at mediating stuff on the playground, how great I was at talking to the parents at the end of the day and helping them manage the transition from work to child pickup and managing those things. And really when my current husband and I moved, I was looking to be an elementary school teacher, but there was not any openings in the town we moved to. And there was ad in the paper for a substance use disorder therapist. And I had a degree in psychology. So I thought, well, I should give that a try. And I fell in love with it and then went to get my master's degree and became a licensed mental health therapist as well. And it's just a great fit for me. I love the work. I love working with people. As long as I get to help people, I'm happy. And I get to feel like I'm helping people a lot. So that's great.
That definitely fits the qualifications for both teacher and therapist. So I think that's incredible. And would love if you could share a little bit more about the work that you do at Ellipsis Health.
Yeah. Well, Ellipsis is really innovating and pioneering in the mental health field. We're creating a mental health vital sign. And we do that by using natural speech. We can monitor a conversation or record a conversation or listen to a recording from an app or digital front door, something like that. And we use deep machine learning, artificial intelligence to analyze that voice sample, the vocal, what you say and how you say it, and give a depression and anxiety severity score. Wow. And the idea for me that's so exciting is starting to level the playing field between physical health vital signs and mental health vital signs, and really start to think about, not for just professionals, but for everybody in the world, that depression and anxiety are truly a disease state and part of how we act and behave as people. It affects the way you speak and form words. And it's not a made up something. It's not a weakness. It really is detectable, and we can do something about it.
That is absolutely incredible. And I really love, I think, kind of the idea around vital signs, especially because I think sometimes just given accessing mental health or really awareness around mental health in the current system is really something that as a patient you sometimes have to be very proactive about and seek out, the GAD-7 or the PHQ-9.
Yeah.
And so I would love if you could also share a little bit more kind of about really the current state of mental health awareness and understanding and how that is really influencing the work that you're doing at Ellipsis Health.
Yeah. I recall, maybe 10 years ago as an executive and a leader, being in community meetings and talking with other leaders and having to really kind of explain what mental health is and fight for a seat at the table and to make it as simple as possible. And it wasn't a hot topic. I think that in the past few years, we've seen a real change and a reduction in stigma, and it's exciting and it's great movement. We now have a lot of things going on in the world. We have celebrities and influencers and commercials and all kinds of things that are helping everyone to be able to talk about mental health in a less stigmatized way. And I still feel every day the real stigma that still exists around, well, gosh, if that person was just more positive, if they just kind of pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, if they just did A, B, and C, they wouldn't have depression, they wouldn't have anxiety. And we don't say those things about diabetes or cancer or asthma. We treat them as a condition. And so the movement and the continued destigmatization in my mind has to do with the science of detecting and monitoring depression and anxiety. I feel like people still believe that mental health is a bit of a black hole, a black box, right? Like we might recognize that somebody's depressed or anxious and we refer them, and what happens is a bit of a mystery. If they get better is a bit of a mystery. How would we know if they're doing better? Can I ask them about it? And so bringing data and science to that conversation, I think really starts to, again, destigmatize and level things out.
Absolutely. And I love that you kind of bring up this almost like hot potato that happens in like the current medical system, where it really is just through referrals and not really having that baseline of continuity, which I would imagine that your, the vital sign development for mental health can really provide that like story through data. So I think that is absolutely incredible. And I also like how you really mention, I think, some of the amazing kind of progress that's being done to combat stigmas, but still some of those misconceptions that do exist. Are there any other kind of barriers that come to mind for you when it comes to being able to even have the conversation with other people or even with yourself, that this may be something to kind of look more into and get help?
Yes. So I think an example would be, and it's still new, and I don't know a lot about it, but I know that there's science also that can use voice to detect things like cardiac problems or stroke risk. So, and the idea of detecting a mental health issue via voice, part of what we hear often is, gosh, is that big brother-y like? How are we going to tell our members or patients or people that this is happening? Will they be scared of it, nervous, right? Because there's still this idea that mental health is different. I think that most people, if you said, gosh, record your voice and we'll tell you if you're at high risk in the next 30 days for a cardiac event, people go, oh, really? Okay, let me try that. But when it's mental health, there's a hesitancy and a question about, is that real? How would we know if it's real? And so that would be an example of where I think we're still treat it and see it differently. There's still a bit of hesitancy. And it's part of what excites me about being in this space is to really start to prove out that the vital sign is real. We can detect these things and get people in treatment earlier, quicker, for better outcomes. We can help people not only be more healthy in their family and in their relationships, but at work. Mental health affects all areas of a person's functioning. And so really detecting, monitoring, thinking about, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but we take our weight, on a regular basis. Many people take a blood pressure on a regular basis. How do we get to the point that we're taking our mental health vital sign on a regular basis and know that if I'm trending up towards a depression state, what am I going to do to manage that? Because it's part of my normal routine. Those are the ideas that get me excited and really passionate about this space and thinking that we have more work to do.
100%. And I really like how you're kind of talking about, mental health as a component of just your overall health as well.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about, really this kind of this type of framework of mental health is just a component of, broader health and well-being and really the importance of those two together?
Yeah, we know, and it's obvious that the brain and the body are connected, and we often treat these things as separate entities, right? I think that the human brain is kind of a last frontier and something that we still learn about all the time. We don't know a lot. Right. And I think that there's so much need out there around mental health. There's not enough therapists to go around. There's not enough psychiatrists to meet the need. So we're going to have to do something very different and really understand what works in terms of getting people better and what doesn't. And the idea that treating depression, anxiety, other mental health conditions does in fact improve overall health. There is research out there. There is evidence that it's true. And I don't know that it's super well understood by many people, but certainly if we use the example of a heart attack, if somebody has a heart attack and then develops depression, it's much harder to follow a nutrition plan and an exercise plan and take your medications on a regular basis if you're also struggling with depression and can't get out of bed, don't have joy in what you're doing, feel like you have no energy. So treating the depression absolutely helps somebody who's just had a heart attack get out of bed, do exercise, eat right, get excited about life, and have a better health outcome. That would be an example, and there's many of these. So treating the whole person is hugely important, and it's often difficult because doctors and nurses are so busy managing all the physical things, and people are uncertain. If I identify a mental health issue, what do I do? Where do I refer the person? Are they going to be okay talking about it? So again, that idea of bringing back a vital sign to say, here's your mental health score, just like a blood pressure. What are we going to do about it? Here's some options. I think can help us manage these things better and pay attention to the whole person.
Absolutely. And I like how you talk about vital scores almost being like shared language that we could all kind of use together to talk about it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and would love to dive in a little bit more. I think some of the other things that you were mentioning really around kind of, early detection through these vital signs. What role does that kind of play when we think about managing mental health conditions? And are there any specific resources? And I would imagine Ellipsis Health being a really great one that can kind of help when it comes to that tracking and some of that early intervention or work that's being done.
Yeah, we are just so excited about the opportunity to consider how we help screen and identify depression and anxiety in a much more broad and global way than has ever been done before. A PHQ-2, patient health questionnaire 2, is like maybe sometimes a standard at doctors' offices, where you answer 2 questions, which is pretty two-dimensional and flat and doesn't take a lot. I mean, 2 questions is it, versus a voice sample where you can talk about anything and we get a much deeper score. That idea is exciting because right now, on average, it takes almost 11 years for somebody to have depression before they're identified and get into treatment.
Wow.
And you think about those 11 years, and given that this is Women's Health Wednesday, you think about a mom, and 11 years of her child's life is the majority of their time at home, that this mother might be suffering with depression, not being her best self, not being as healthy as can be. And so if we can shorten that gap and get people treatment sooner, it helps that mother, helps the child, it helps her relationship. And we're talking about potential better health outcomes. We're talking about the idea that if we can identify depression when it's mild, it might be much easier to manage than waiting 11 years until it's severe and really, really serious. So those are a couple of the reasons why we want to start this work sooner and get everyone comfortable with the idea of thinking about monitoring on a regular basis.
100%. And we actually have a comment from the audience kind of talking about mental health in the workplace, and which is great because it's a perfect segue to my next question, which really kind of speaks to mental health and kind of, you know, the work that can be done, not just from an individual, but thinking about our schools, our workplaces, our communities. Are there any specific strategies or things that you have in mind when it comes to creating kind of, you know, mentally healthy and supportive environments that really enable whether that's specific tracking or just enabling even the conversation to be had?
Yes, well, I think I've said it a number of times, and I think it's such a new concept that it's worth talking about many times, which is this idea of a vital sign and a data point, and that it's really a scientific piece of information. I think about, I don't know the year, I should know this because I use this as an example a lot, but when a blood pressure cuff was new, did people totally understand it? No. But did they trust their doctor to use it? Probably, right? So we don't have to 100% understand it, but to start to think about a valid data point and vital signs. We all understand that language. We all understand that I start taking a blood pressure medicine and I might not feel better yet, but I see my blood pressure starting to change and I'll eventually feel better. Much the same in mental health. We start treatment, we start medications, we start down a pathway to recovery, and we don't feel better immediately. However, we do see scores changing pretty quickly. And even within the mental health field, for therapists and psychiatrists, moving towards the research and evidence-based practice of measurement-based care using this vital sign as a regular part of our practice to know if our patients are getting better or not. Have we missed something? Do we need to bring extra resources to bear, try a new thing in session? Is not widely practiced, but is evidence-based and helps people get better quicker, because we know if the patient and I as a therapist are seeing scores coming down, we're going to trust that the path we're on is working. We know it takes a little time to feel better, but the scores start to change. So in terms of identifying and monitoring, vital signs are hugely important and just as important in mental health, just as useful. So we want to shift that conversation, shift the practice to really become data-driven, science-based.
That's incredible. And I can just say, as a patient, as a consumer, I love being able to track like my health data. So smartwatch, I am definitely a fan of kind of seeing how things change over time. I think just it makes me feel like I like have control and I know kind of what's going on in my body. And so for Ellipsis Health, I think just the idea of being able to have like a data point, something that you can turn to and provide either the reassurance or just like the flag in your head, to maybe kind of look into it further already, I think is incredible. And for your specific platform, is it something that, you know, myself as a consumer can kind of get onto the platform? Or is it kind of geared specifically towards healthcare, you know, practitioners or physicians?
Right now, our work is geared towards healthcare professionals who would work with their patient or their member, if a payer, to give this resource. We are working towards an FDA clearance and working towards a direct-to-consumer option. And I would say, again, that's another place where we have to get really comfortable and work on stigma. There's a lot of questions we get about, well, what if somebody knew that they have moderate depressive symptoms potentially? Like, what would they do? And I think, well, gosh, if I know I just gained 5 pounds, I'm not going off the deep end. I have a plan in place. So just similarly, people aren't going to, in all likelihood, lose it. They're not going to freak out. Let's get a plan in place. We know that I can go online, I can practice yoga, I can do some mindfulness, I might touch base with my therapist. Like, there's a lot of things people can do to manage their own behavioral health, mental health, wellness, without having to be scared of it or nervous.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that I would love if you could even share a little bit more about some of the things, you know, maybe for folks that are listening and kind of thinking, wow, I mean, as much as I would love to have that vital sign, I think maybe in my mind, I can kind of feel that things have maybe changed, you know, stress at work, etc. Are there any particular resources or tips or things that can kind of, that you particularly could use or that you found benefit in for those that are kind of maybe having that conversation right now in their head?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of mindfulness, which is a broad category. There's meditation, breath work, grounding techniques. All of those things have huge benefits for mental health and wellness. There's a whole school of positive psychology and a set of resiliency skills and practices that people can start integrating into their daily life that helps basically inoculate themselves against difficult and stressful times, so that with these practices, I am more resilient as a person. So that would be something that, you know, I do a lot of and work with individuals around. There are also an amazing amount of great and innovative virtual options, apps and other things that have great mental health content that can help you, anybody with therapeutic options like cognitive behavioral therapy without having to go to a therapist. So there's so many options out there in our current world that weren't there 10 years ago that people can avail themselves of. And often it's really thinking about what has helped me stay in a positive, good place in the past, and how do I do more of that? How do I reinforce it? And if I am feeling really uncertain, thinking about talking to a therapist or your doctor for an option is always a reasonable pathway as well.
Absolutely. I think that's incredible. And I'm so curious to kind of ask you, because you are literally at the forefront of so much amazing work that's kind of happening to advance the way that we not only view, but also manage mental health. When you think about kind of the future that you would want to see for mental health care, what kind of comes top of mind for you? What are some of the things that you are really kind of seeing and kind of actively excited about when we think about what this could look like?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful in 10 to 20 years, we'll look back at the therapy and the mental health work we're doing today and go, gosh, we wish we knew this back then. I really hope that we transform care and that it becomes more of a science. I don't think it will ever be a total science, just like practicing medicine is an art. Mental health is an art and will remain so, but that it's much more science-based. It's much more evidence-based. We understand the brain better, and we use data on a regular basis and talk about it in a very accepting way. And it becomes a regular topic and a regular part of healthcare and our personal health routines. And it's not something that we only talk about when something's really wrong.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. I think that's amazing. Yeah, I think my one kind of takeaway that I'm getting from this amazing conversation is, number one, I just love the vital side, and I can't wait for direct to consumer version where I can kind of track my own and kind of see how things change. It's going to be a good lesson for me to realize, oh, okay, like I'm very stressed in this period, or anything like that kind of environmentally. But I definitely love, I think that really the work being done to kind of make it not just proactive, but for all of us to have that common language of talking about it, of being able to, work and work on managing it, I think is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, we're excited. We know that 1 in 4 people will experience depression in their lifetime. Many people have anxiety. We know that this is a necessary topic. It's a necessary new innovation in the field of health. And we're excited to see where it goes. We know that there's people out there who need help sooner than what they're getting it. So that's where I get really excited and passionate around how do we get those folks something reliable and trustworthy that helps them feel like, okay, I just have this thing, just like blood pressure problem or diabetes. I have a mental health issue right now, and I'm going to manage it, period. That it's that simple.
Yeah, another tool in the toolkit.
Yes. Yes.
That's incredible. Well, I just realized that we are at time, which is crazy. I feel like it just flew by. Thank you so much, Michelle, for such an enlightening conversation. I think the work that's being done is so incredible, especially now kind of in this, post-pandemic / very digitally integrated world. I think it's going to be really incredible to have, tools like yours in the world. So I'm very excited about it.
Thanks for having me. This was great to talk about.